So welcome once again to this conversation, Senate Bill 71 Friday webinar with the Arkansas Public Policy Panel. My name is Osyrus Bolly, and I'm here because, like I said, we're having a conversation about Senate Bill 71. This is an attempt during the legislative session to ban affirmative action in Arkansas. This bill is sponsored by Senator Dan Sullivan, a Republican from Jonesboro. And in this conversation, we will be telling you why you should oppose it. Like I said before, we will not be playing devil's advocate. We're going to tell you why you should oppose it, what to do while you're opposing it, and basically just get this information out to the general public in Arkansas about this bad bill that we all oppose. But first, I want to make sure that I introduce you all to our guests. Let them introduce themselves. I know a lot about both of them, but I want them to just kind of give everybody an idea who they are. So first off, ladies first, introduce y'all to a good friend of mine, Rosa Velázquez. So Rosa, take it away.
Thank you, Osyrus. It's such an honor to be here with you all. My name is Rosa Velázquez. I am a community organizer and an advocate for educational, racial here in Arkansas. I've been doing immigrant rights work for the past 12 years, and now I serve as executive director at the Foundation for Social Impact, continuing the work, impact work and advocacy here.
Thank you, Rosa. And our next guest, Brother Ryan D. Davis, another good friend of mine. Hey, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and tell the people about yourself?
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with Rosa. So I know she can keep us in order in no time. And not to say that Osyrus wrong, but I know Rosa will. Ryan Davis, co-founder of the Little Rock Freedom Fund, a people's advocate in general, and an advocate for access for all people. Also the program coordinator for the Micah Fellows program, a program that equips faith leaders in Arkansas with everything they need to help us move the needle toward ending poverty and advocate for justice in the state of Arkansas. A preacher of the gospel to me, I tell folks all the time, I'm a Christian fundamentalist, and the fundamentals of my faith say that we do justice, love mercy, and walk with humility. The fundamentals of my faith say that the poor are blessed. Blessed are those who are broken in spirit. The fundamentals of my faith say that when they mention the day of the Lord in the biblical text, the day of the Lord is something that happens when justice prevails, or as the prophet Amos says, rolls down like waters and like an everlasting stream. So anyway, how y'all doing?
All right. Always blessing us with a good word. Thank you, Ryan and Rosa, for being here. And like I said, we oppose Senate Bill 7. And I just want to, saying, what would either one of y'all, when we start this off, what were your initial thoughts when y'all heard about Senate Bill 71, when y'all read Senate Bill 71? What were your initial thoughts about this bill?
I can go first. It's really concerning. I got a phone call from one of my senators on Sunday night saying, hey, there's this bill that's going to be heard tomorrow, and we really need you all to be there. As soon as I started reading it, I knew that this was going to target the Latinx community, the minority communities, all the programs that are deemed preferential. They're on the line under this bill. Also, I think one of the most concerning things for me was when we were in the meeting with the Black Caucus and Senator Sullivan. He couldn't answer any of the questions, but I think they're really adamant about trying to pass this. So for me, it was, how do we mobilize the community, let them know that this is not a good bill, that this is targeting minority communities specifically, and targeting, essentially our way of life. So I know that there's a lot of work to do, but bills like this have absolutely no place in Arkansas. It's what I call a solution to a non-existing problem.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll echo with what Rosa said. See, that there's that benefit that I was speaking of having Rosa on here, is that I can just sit back and say amen, because what she said last is important for folks to hear. The effort towards so-called affirmative action in the state of Arkansas have been so anemic as it is that this is insult to injury. I first saw the bill, and one of the things that stood out the most was that very pointedly, the things that were crossed off out of the bill, the words equity and the words civil rights, were crossed off out of the bill. This is culture war cut and paste legislation. They have legislation in the state of Tennessee using the exact same language, There was an attempt in Michigan, which has a more fair power split in the legislature, using the exact same language. There's legislation coming up in Oklahoma using the exact same language. So this is people operating on behalf of their masters on the national level to do their bidding without any consideration for what this actually means in the state of Arkansas. It suggests, one, that there's discrimination against white people, white males in particular, in the state of Arkansas. We know that's not true, and I'll just leave it there. But I was very, I think all of us probably were struck by what was excluded from the bill, specifically the idea that we need not pay attention to civil rights and that we need not pay attention to the word equity. Equity has become one of those critical race theory words that a lot of folks are crab walking backwards from. And so it's knee jerk, it's thoughtless. And there's no reason for any thinking person to support this bill.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you pointed out, man, because we know that these attacks on it's kind of like a culture war going on with these words. They're attacking and they're banning. A word like equity is now all of a sudden one of those buzzwords that as soon as you hear it, now all of a sudden back on that word now too. And like you mentioned, civil rights is being struck out of this. I just want to go down to a few of the things that I know that that this bill would do, and that you all mentioned. Section 3 of the bill will strike the word equity from the Equity Assistance Center and substitutes it with equality. I don't get why all of a sudden we want to take away the word equity and replace it with equality. They have two different meanings, but that's something that's mentioned in this bill. A few other different issues that I took issue with in the sections 8 through 16 of the bill concerning the law currently titled Arkansas Geographical Critical Need Minority Teacher Scholarship Act of 2001. This law was enacted to provide scholarships to Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American students enrolled or accepted for enrollment at an undergraduate degree, granting teacher education program in order to recruit those students to teaching areas of Arkansas. It strikes that word minority, strikes the definition of the Native American group in the act, and all of a sudden, they want to change the language around that. Section 4 of the bill will repeal the subchapter 19 to chapter 17 in Title 6 of the Arkansas Code. That law requires each public school district and open enrollment charter school district in Arkansas to prepare a 3-year teacher administrator recruitment and retention plan. We know that the teacher profession has been something during the pandemic that a lot of those numbers have dropped because we can't get teachers to come back. And this hasn't been just a problem during the pandemic, but it's been a problem for years now. The lack of appreciation for teachers, not giving them the livable wages they deserve. We have been having a hard time keeping our good teachers and retaining them. And so this will repeal that. Section 6 of the bill would eliminate the current law that requires state-supported colleges and universities to establish a program and prepare annual reports and 5-year plans for retention of Black people and other members of minority groups, of students, faculty, and staff. And so, and even in Section 1 of the bill, ABC, the Alcohol, Beverage, and Control Division, this will prohibit them from considering the lack of diversity in ownership and financial interest in the geographic area as an issue when it pertains to permit applications. So we know a lot of our locally owned small business owners, people of color, get the because of Section 1 of the bill, and that will prohibit that. There's a lot of different bills that I could go. But my question to both of y'all is, what would be the cost of Arkansas abandoning affirmative action?
I think it would be incredibly detrimental to our community, right? Structural racism continues to be a problem within our communities. We need to look back at why even we had to turn to affirmative action, right? Because our communities were treated inequitably. And we have to hit this head on, because affirmative action policies, they don't just benefit the minority community, they benefit everyone. Osyrus, I think when we are part of a diverse community that undoubtedly contributes to the educational and cultural experience within our communities, we flourish so much better. I think one of the most important things that I always say is we are stronger together, right? Whenever I was trying to push legislation, we had to come to the community and really get support from everyone. And this, instead of uniting us, this bill, SB71, is completely dividing us, and it is completely throwing communities of color, minority communities, melanated communities under the bus. I think this is an accelerated trend that we're seeing at a national level, which is also concerning because if it ends up going to the Supreme Court, we already know what the results might be. So I think that's my fear, that at the end of the day, that this is going to happen, and that's why we have to continue to unite the community.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that will immediately happen is that there will be a chilling effect on current efforts to recruit teachers in the very Black Delta. There'll be a chilling effect on recruiting Black and brown students to state institutions. There'll be some confusion because this bill does not spell out specifically enough what exactly you cannot do. There'll be a chilling effect because there'll be criminal penalties for doing these things. And Arkansas is bad about that, making civil things criminal. Of course, we make non-payment of rent in this state criminal. And so, this is going to throw our whole system of education, recruiting of students and recruiting of professionals into a tailspin. And what's going to end up happening is this will go to court, and we will now spend more money going to court to, which is surprising to me that fiscal conservatives don't mind spending an extra amount of the state's money going to court to fight these senseless bills. And, I want to say this, though, that I think one of the things, I went to the hearing that the Black Caucus had with Senator Sullivan, and one of the things that he alluded to or alludes to is the idea that we don't need affirmative action anymore, and people want to couch the idea of folks being for affirmative action in some sort of paranoia. It's almost like saying, well, the Klan has not been active for years, we don't need Klan watch, or we don't need any sort of law enforcement focus on white supremacy or white supremacist organizations anymore. But here's the fact of the matter. Affirmative action is an acknowledgement of the fact that there have been, for over 160 years since so-called citizenship of people of color in this state, some affirmed actions that have favored white people for several decades, a few dozen decades. Actions that have favored white people in state contracting, in state recruiting. You think about when several districts became, I won't say integrated, but they became desegregated. A lot of them in the late 60s and early 70s in Arkansas. Arkansas was one of those resisting outliers that took 20 years to get, full desegregation around the state. A lot of those Black teachers and Black administrators were dismissed from their jobs. Especially Black administrators, because God forbid a Black principal be the boss of some white teachers. And so these are very affirmed actions by the state against people who are living right now. And those actions have to have a corrective course. this is why we have, this, again, very menial, very anemic affirmative action that we have in the state of Arkansas. It's because we desire a corrective course. And we don't want a corrective course based on paranoia. We have a corrective course based on lived experiences. We're saying that we don't trust the folks in charge to deal fairly with everybody. And it plays itself out everywhere we look. We look at appointments on commissions. We look at favoritism in contracts giving in this overwhelmingly white state. And so we're looking at it from the standpoint of, we do have to protect these common resources, because the people who are handing out parts and pieces of our commonwealth don't do so fairly. So we have to have some legislation in place in order for this to be here. And it's curious to me because, like I said, I don't think that there was any thought put into this outside of, what so-called conservatism has always been thoughtless about over the past several years of the new iteration of the culture war, which is just a simple idea that we want to get rid of what they call preferential treatment. They don't want to get rid of preferential treatment. They want to revert back to a day where the preferential treatment favored white people.
Mhm.
Yeah, already.
You're looking at Arkansas hasn't recovered from Jim Crow, y'all. They're still trying to ideate what it means to go back or to make this great again. Like, that's exactly what they're trying to do, and they're doing it by erasing the Black and brown communities.
And so a lot of people, a lot of our legislators and a lot of people that support some of these legislators like to have historical amnesia. They act like they forget everything that happened in the past, and they act like it was 1,000 years ago, when a lot of these things, they were alive to see a lot of the injustices going on. And of course, they're alive right now to see a lot of the injustice. This bill reminds me of that term of reverse racism, where now they replace reverse racism with reverse discrimination. And we know that this is not true, that nobody's experiencing the reverse discrimination. It's I don't know what dream that was made up in, but that's the word that's being thrown out there. So I want to ask you, we got a question from online, basically, and feel free to send your question if you have any questions on Facebook, people that's watching out there. Got a question. Do you believe this bill is a gateway back to segregation?
Oh, I think we've walked through the gate back towards segregation. We've seen that in how schools have been dealt with. So-called school choice is a march toward resegregation. It means that if folks want to send their white kids to Lee Academy in Lee County, now they have state funds to do it. And they don't have to, even though, there are a significant number of white people in Lee County. You can look at those public schools, the traditional public schools there, and you won't see any more than 1% of those students who are white. That means that they'll be able to get that money and take it to Lee Academy, which is a segregation academy, just like Pulaski Academy here is, just like Marvel Academy is. They'll be able to take that money and go to these segregation academies. They'll be able in Little Rock, when they don't want to encounter our middle schools, take that money and go to Central Arkansas Christian and other schools. I'm naming names because, this is what folks want to do. They want to take our public resources and privatize them for the sake of segregation. That's not a new goal. That's a 70-plus-year-old goal. That's a goal that's as old as the Brown decision. These are the decisions that were made by white citizens councilors in Arkansas and in Mississippi 2 generations ago. And so the march back toward resegregation is finally reaching full fruition for these folks. They've strategized and taught their children, these things. And no matter how much they lift up the name and know how much of a alabaster angel they want to play Martin Luther King as, and how often they talk about the victory of the Little Rock Nine, these are things that are acting in ignorant appraisal of what really happened back then. And so, um, you know, we see schools resegregating in the state of Arkansas. They are perhaps more segregated now than they were not perhaps, they are more segregated now than they were in the 80s. You know, a white majority city like Little Rock still has a 70% black majority in its public schools. And with Latinx students, Hispanic students, you can bring that up to about near 80%. And so, you know, I think now the move is to resegregate the money, where school boards like the Little Rock School District's board was making efforts before the school board was taken over, and is now making some efforts toward looking at the vendors and saying, we spend $400 million in this city. Who gets the light bulb contract? And what are the barriers that have prevented black and brown providers from being able to get some of these contracts? Now the state is saying you don't have the option to do that. You don't have the option to look at that very dangerous word equity in how you dispense funds and how you get vendors. So, you know, now the move is to, like I said, to resegregate the money.
It's reducing critical funding to already distressed communities, disadvantaged populations, right? So the idea of defunding the police is ridiculous to some people, but the idea of defunding education has absolutely no light bulb in their head. And I'm like, this is where an uneducated population is going to be at the mercy of anyone that's in power, and that's not okay. That's exactly what they don't want. They don't want an educated population that can, you know, read the bills and say this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and like you said, ignorance and power is a dangerous combination. And so, you know, I do want to mention that when this bill passed through, it's the slick thing about the legislative session. It gets on my nerves every year when they do stuff like this. But this bill was able to pass through Senate Judiciary Committee last week on Tuesday, when what was everybody doing in Arkansas? Scrambling like we always do as soon as that inclement weather hit. We ain't going to work, we ain't going to school, and we surely ain't trying to get stuck in the Capitol. So what do? They go in there, take 10 minutes, pass this type of bill through there without anybody able to oppose it or anything. And that's the way things happen here. So, you know, it's always important to stay on our P's and Q's about these bills because, you know, when we think they're not working, that's when they're doing the most work. And so I'm glad that you all are here to break it down for everybody clear and concise so it can forever be, look, you know, we got to oppose this, and this is why. You know, and I want to go back to the, you know, saying some of these words that we've been hearing, because for years now, you know, we have organizations, nonprofits, institutions, businesses, especially after the summer of resistance, the year of resistance in 2020, you know, people showing how can we show that we are making a better effort to be allies in the fight for justice and fight for racial justice for all people, you know. And then all of a sudden you see more and more talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. And you know, I see you, Ryan. I see your vision. You know, we can get to that. But just real quick, in your opinions, why should we prioritize more and more diversity?
Why should we prioritize more diversity? Because we're in 2023, because Arkansas is changing, because the world is changing, and because we're humans, right? And it's not necessarily just because we're Black or we're brown, but it's because we're a community. And I think one of the points that Senator Sullivan made was that, you know, with this bill, discrimination would be over. Discrimination is never going to be over. And we have to start understanding that no matter what the issue, there's always going to be opposition. So I think in order for us to fully engulf and enjoy the communities, you know, like I said, and I'll keep on saying it, bills like this have no place in Arkansas, because instead of uniting, they divide us. And we have to be firm on equity. We have to talk about what equity means with not only people of color, but also women. The only group of folks that this bill doesn't directly affect are white men. And the majority of people that are in power in the Arkansas legislature are white men. So this is not going to affect their daily lives, but we're gonna be affected as not only women, not only as Latinas, but as minority communities in the state of Arkansas that are already having a difficult time accessing colleges, accessing scholarships, accessing funds for entrepreneurial support, and after school programs for our kids, right? Like, because they're going to be deemed a special minority group, then I'm afraid that a lot of this funding is going to be taken away. So that's why I oppose this, but that's why I firmly believe that everything has to be more diverse. The world is changing. By 2050, the United States is not going to look like it already is looking now.
Most definitely.
Yeah, you know, affirmative action is corrective. It's a necessary corrective. The Supreme Court has said in the past, obviously this is a different court, that we have a compelling interest that diversity in college admissions, diversity in employment, that there is a compelling interest for those things to exist. That's not necessarily the line that I take. I take the line that, again, and you know, people get caught up in this idea that, oh, we're paying for historical wrongs, and yes, absolutely. Because what you're saying otherwise is that we continue down the trajectory of those historical wrongs and we just try to figure it out as we go. I don't trust humanity. I don't trust white supremacy in general to do that without there being some codified corrective actions on the part of institutions and on the part of the state. People can call that reverse discrimination, but there's zero evidence. There's zero evidence that there has been a reversal of discrimination vis-a-vis affirmative action. If you look at the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and you look at discrimination claims, and despite what you might say about why, only since about 2010, less than 3% of employment discrimination claims have come about a white man being discriminated against. Now, you know, people again will make up all kind of reasons as to why that is, but I think that the most prolifically powerful and emboldened people in the country, if they were being discriminated against, they would bring something to the EEOC. You know, I'm talking about under any administration, there's not been, just this great proliferation of white men complaining about employment discrimination. If you look at the college cases, you look at the Fisher young lady down at the University of Texas who complained about, not being admitted. And you look at the folks who she put herself up against. These are folks who had better academic records than them. Affirmative action is not about taking pitiful, unqualified people and placing them in places where they're in danger of either not being successful or they are not qualified to be. The whole idea that this is merit versus whatever the opposite of merit is a lie. It's a complete and total lie. And can we get to that question?
Yeah, because that's one of them words people just love to throw out there is merit. And merit has such a broad definition. People don't understand. People always associate the word merit with hard work and deserving. And we know a lot of times merit comes in the form of nepotism, of who I know.
These folks don't respect merit.
But I'm gonna go ahead and read it. I'm gonna go ahead and read the question.
Can I say this before you read the question?
We just had
a gubernatorial election wherein if merit were on the ballot, and I'll just leave it at that.
Come on now. Ain't nobody trying to hear y'all, man. Ain't nobody trying to hear that, man.
They ain't trying to hear.
Ain't nobody trying to hear no sound doctrine. So let's ask this question. I don't know who you say, but you say this is targeting minorities. But doesn't affirmative action target proficient academic students by taking merit-based educational opportunities away from those who academically earn it? Question from the audience.
I'm gonna speak from my own personal experience. I went to what folks call a selective, small liberal arts school north of Chicago. And I remember we were the largest recruited class of Black students. Now, mind you, the school, just under 2,000, each class size somewhere around 350 or so, something like that. And there were 27 of us. And we were the largest recruited class of Black students there. I remember a student wrote an editorial about affirmative action, how he was against affirmative action and how he sees evidence of it. And we started putting our record up against his. And, you know, this is not somebody who, like we found, 80% of the Black students who were recruited that year was in the top 10% of his class. These were not school leaders. These were not persons who, like myself, ran with the Olympic torch and won a national award for my work with the children of battered women. These are not people who won national debate awards. So it's a lie, this idea that schools are reaching out for students with a 2.5 and favoring them over white kids with a 4.0. That does not happen. It never happens. Well, let me not say it never happens, because I mean, I'm sure somebody can pull something out of the air that because there are exceptions everywhere. But widely speaking, affirmative action is not a matter of targeting unqualified people to preference them over white kids who are qualified. It is the university saying we have a compelling interest in having a diverse population of students here. So we're going to make more effort. We're going to spend some money to recruit Black students to come to this school. Students who would not usually know that they have access to this school, Hispanic students who would not usually apply to this school because of, this or that issue. We're going to make an extra effort to recruit these students to the school. And even if it means, some kids who wanted to get in don't get in. But the crazy part about it is I never hear the same argument about folks who get into college based on their legacy status. Never hear the same argument about the fact that the vast majority of, you look at the state of Texas, they take every student body president and they give them a preferential admission to the University of Texas in Austin. If you look at statistically, Black and Hispanic students perform GPA wise the white student body presidents by 1.5 GPA points. Nobody ever says that. That's not a merit. That's also not a merit-based, admission policy. Not merit as far as grades are. And so the idea that there are folks who, based on the question, who academically earn it is a canard. It's a red herring. It's not for real.
Just adding a little bit, I didn't have my first teacher of color who happened to be Black until I got to college, my senior year in college. So increasing diversity in education is super important. For me, representation matters, right? And HBCUs have benefited greatly from affirmative action policies. They were established to serve the Black community because the Black community wasn't being served by higher education institutions. And a lot of these were created in the aftermath of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, right? So these HBCUs continue to play a vital role in educating the community and preparing Black students for leadership positions. Representation matters, representation matters, representation matters. We have to be in these boards. We have to be in these classrooms. We have to be in these legislative areas where the decisions that are being made for us have to be made by people that look like us, that understand the issues. Merit-based, you should try harder.
Let's keep it real. You know what I'm saying?
I also typed as part of the answer that that the reality is that the consensus among states is all among states in particular, and especially and then also this is codified in federal affirmative action, that only affirmative action plans that do not compromise valid job or educational qualifications are lawful. It's not lawful in the federal government to give Fred Sanford the tires contract for the Pentagon. Even though he runs a junkyard and probably has lots of tires out there, he wouldn't qualify. Fred and Lamont would not qualify for that contract. Now again, we're talking about actions that have been affirmed for years. You think about when they desegregated defense contracting during World War II, the amount of resentment that now they were going to take funds out of the pockets of only white people, white men in particular, became a thing. Nobody was talking about merit then. Was talking about qualifications then. And so it's not lost on me that all of a sudden we're a merit-based nation. That all of a sudden we only respect qualifications. I find that odd. And then you think about the fact that UAPB and the University of Arkansas are constitutionally supposed to be funded at the same level because they're the state's two land grant institutions. We've not seen that happen. This is abject discrimination. We've seen black school districts, black municipalities, we've seen them starved of public funds that black people have contributed to. We see land loss among black farmers, not because black farmers are too lazy and don't want to farm, but because there's discrimination at the USDA level. So if there can't be corrective actions, then what do people want us to do? We don't trust you all. We don't trust the folks in charge to not do things without some priding and without some codification of affirmative action. I don't trust that people are, they woke up one day and like, you know what? We don't want to be racist anymore. We want to share everything equally. I don't believe that.
Yeah, that's just real. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to come to your school just to play sports. So don't expect us to not have our students that are thriving academically and that haven't had those opportunities. So I like how you mentioned, saying you went to a liberal arts college in Illinois that you were recruited by. You know what I'm saying? Most times people don't know about these great schools until they're recruited, whether it's for academics, whether it's for sports, until they get that opportunity to see these schools up close and personal. You know what I'm saying? We need just as much attention as everybody else, if not more.
Exactly.
Shoot us a fair deal shoot us the fair deal over 2 generations, and we might be able to say, well, this is finally working out. You know what I'm saying? But that has not been the case. It's never been the case. And it's a lie. It's a lie against history. It's a lie against people who've died and struggled to say that it is the case. And then one of the things that Senator Sullivan said in his hearing with the Black Caucus was that, well, when is this? When do we stop having it? They want us to put it on the timeline, and we.
Ain't no sunset.
We're waiting on. We're waiting on you.
Ain't no sunset clause written for this, right?
No.
And you know what I'm saying? We can't change the hearts and minds, and give it a time period. You know what I'm saying?
Even he acknowledged that. He said, well, we know racism will still exist. He acknowledged that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said it. The same way they're trying to privatize schools too by kids who really need the school choice. Well, we really need affirmative action.
Look, they invalidated and I'm sorry. I just want to say this one last thing. There was a minority contractor program in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond has a plurality of black and brown people in that city. When they got rid of when they invalidated the minority contracting program, which only required up to 12% of contracts be given to 25% of contracts be given to companies that are at least partially minority owned. And we know what that means. A white company brings in a black partner who's kind of like the spook who sat by the door in a lot of cases. Now, those contracts, when they invalidated that program, fell from 38.5% to 2% in a city where the plurality of people. So you can't tell me. And then they even admitted in the case, the folks who had the contracts, they were not unqualified. It didn't fall because these folks weren't qualified. It fell because the folks in charge of the money levers, of the levels of power, reverted back to doing what they did before. We do not trust that you're gonna shoot us a fair deal.
Right. And Osyrus,
Yeah.
I want to touch on the mention that you had said about a lot of us not being exposed to colleges and other thinking until we got to college. That's why I'm also a firm believer of representation, because high school counselors, I'm speaking on personal experience. I was told just to go to community college because there was no room for me at a four-year institution. There were, my class had 82 students, and I believe 16 out of those 82 were Black and brown. Ask me the number of people that were Black and brown that went directly to college. Not very many of those 16 of us went to college, because the counselors didn't know how to talk to us. They didn't know how to speak to undocumented folks. They didn't know how to speak to Latinx folks. They didn't know how to help us write our essays as a person of color in a rural community, right? So when you have somebody that knows what the experience is, when you have somebody that knows what it is to be formerly undocumented, or what it is to be a woman raised by a single mom, those are the experiences that we need, so we can have and we can provide opportunities of growth and education to our kids. So again, representation matters. And when we have people that can identify with a lot of our students in their daily lives, then I think that we can be better equipped to sending our kids off to college and providing those opportunities of education and accessibility.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosa. You know what I'm saying? You speaking truth to power. You know what I'm saying? This is a harmful bill. And what you're mentioning is something that I think our legislators are experiencing. A whole lot of cultural incompetence. You know what I'm saying? They don't know, they don't ask questions, they just file bills a lot of times, and then they expect everybody to just go along with what they're thinking. But you haven't experienced, you haven't talked, you haven't surveyed, you haven't gathered with anybody, you ain't fellowship with nobody to know what you're even talking about. And you got a whole lot of cultural incompetence when you file in certain bills. Senate Bill 71, it's an attack on teachers, students, small business owners, employers, employees, veterans, women, people of color, Black, Indigenous, Latinx community, Asian. This is an attack on all of us. I got one last question, and we're going to shut it down from the audience. I got one last question. This has been a powerful discussion and a powerful lesson. This audience member writes, I'm concerned how far-reaching this bill will go. Specifically, I have a child that's disabled. Could this bill affect that community as well?
Absolutely. This bill is so broad, Osyrus, that we don't even know the damaging effects until it happens, right? And it's also up to interpretation of whoever's reading it. So if an administrator is reading it, and they don't want to be, and Dan said this, Senator Sullivan said this, that people that go against what is written in this bill will be committing a crime. Yep. So if the administrator reads it and deems that that group of folks is let's say more privileged, then yes, they will be affected. It's all about interpretation, and the way that we know the education system is going in Arkansas, it is something that we all have to be concerned about for all of our kids, including our differently able children.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are federal prohibitions that don't seem to matter in Senate Bill 71. Section 503 of the Americans with Disability Act prohibits discrimination in employment for folks with disabilities. It provides for the necessary accommodations for folks with disabilities. And the bill says Senate Bill 71 in Arkansas says very broadly that we're getting rid of what they call preferential treatment. So that means preferential treatment for anybody. So somebody if somebody is challenged because they won't make the proper accommodations for a student, for a worker with a disability, then they can say that, well, under Arkansas law, I'm not allowed to give you any preferential treatment because it's against the law. Or they can say quite pointedly, I don't have to give you preferential treatment because it's against the law. Whether that treatment means, a certain set of work hours to accommodate your disability, like I said, physical work arrangements to accommodate that. This bill is so broad, it doesn't name it specifically, but this is a cliff we're falling over because it doesn't really name anything specifically. It just says broadly, we're against preferential treatment. We are against civil rights. We are against equity. That's it. So any effort to, and you think about the fact that folks with disabilities represent a significant portion of our society. Unfortunately, you wouldn't know that from entertainment and other media. Unfortunately, we don't often see children who use wheelchairs to access spaces, even though they exist. And so that kind of out of sight, out of mind ignorance is what propels folks to put forward this kind of legislation that will, on the back end, be harmful to families, individuals, children with disabilities.
And I think that also goes for like any special protected class. ESL students are in danger of not having access to ESL. I'm a product of ESL in school. It is incredibly needed for our communities. And statistics show that 90% of ESL students in the state of Arkansas are US citizens. Only 10% of the ESL students that are coming from outside of the country. So you're literally going to be denying an opportunity for growth and learning to US citizens. I mean, if that's the conversation that we want to have, but programs that are directed specifically for a different community, like the Dream Act programs, right? Disadvantaged programs. Those are all up for interpretation of whoever's reading it. And that's why this is so harmful, and we need to like heavily oppose it. Call your legislators and tell them to oppose this.
Yes. Call your legislators, tell them to oppose this bill. I want to say thank you to Rosa Velázquez, Ryan D. Davis. SB71, I told y'all, this is a conversation where we are adamant. We need to oppose this. This is bad legislation. This bill is blatantly wrong and disrespectful to our community. And so, we're going to close it out like this right here before we keep on going and going and going. Call your legislators, tell them to oppose SB71. Get in tune with what's going on in this legislative session if you are unfamiliar with what's going on. One way you can do that is by following Citizens First Congress. Go to Citizens First Congress on Facebook, like the page, go to the website, sign up for the emails and the updates. Final word, I just want to give y'all a final word if y'all want to give contact information or just say any last statements, and we're going to close it down, y'all.
Elections have consequences. This is one of the consequences of the elections and the results of the elections. It's important that we register to vote, that we get out to vote. It's also important that our legislators hear directly from us. I posted the numbers to call. The number for the switchboard is 501-682-5600. If you don't know who your legislator is, follow Citizens First Congress. They have a great tool that'll help you understand who your senators, who your representatives are. Call them, let them know that you oppose this bill. If you have any further questions, reach out to us. But inactivity is what got us here, and I urge every single one of you, if you are a woman, if you're Latino, Latinx, if you're Black, if you're Asian, this is going to directly affect you and your children somehow. So it is harmful, it is dangerous, we don't need it. Oppose SB71, call 501-682-5600 and tell them that you oppose SB71 and that they should too.
I got to echo what Rosa said about elections have consequences, because the level of participation and engagement in the state is dismally low. I know that there are very valid reasons for that. The barriers been put in place, but you know what? We have to transgress the barriers. We have to look at every piece of legislation coming out of this legislature with a hermeneutic suspicion. We have to be suspicious of it. We have to do some coalition building. We have to, in this odd numbered year, start building the coalition that's going to help our children have a better future for the state of Arkansas. I do want to lift up the work of the NAACP, the Jacksonville branch of the NAACP's Political Action Committee. They did meet with Senator Sullivan. Thank you to Kwame Abdul-Bey for putting this information out there. I was glad I was able to see it before we came on this recording, and he's going to offer some rewritten and amended parts and pieces to that. And you know, that's not capitulation, folks. That's democracy at work. You know, you have an intractable group of folks who are fighting a needless culture war. You know, who are fighting against real people in the name of latent white supremacy. And I'm glad that there's some folks who are willing to, you know, to walk in there and to offer some democratic solutions. And I like too that his that his act is going to be entitled in part to protect and expand the affirmative action. So I don't know how Senator Sullivan is going to take that, but there's a lot to be feared for here. There's a fear for the Hunt decree districts to be dissolved because they favor you know, voting districts for Black and brown folks to vote for judicial elections. There are a lot of consequences that will come from this bill that are not, you know, simply stated. And so, you know, like Rosa said, you know, I know, you know, folks out here working, living life, pushing through. And so it's incumbent on folks who have the time, who have the wherewithal, who have the knowledge to really engage folks, and let's build a coalition toward a better Arkansas.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa and Ryan. Beautifully said. Thank you for mentioning that the NAACP has took a stance on this to oppose it, because it was mentioned earlier this week that the NAACP reported that, and that was a lie. The NAACP, none of the chapters in the state have came out in support of Senate Bill 71. So if you hear that rumor, we can go ahead and shut that down right now. No chapter in the state of Arkansas from the NAACP has came out in support of SB 71, and no chapter will. You know what I'm saying? So it's not even up for debate. I want to thank, again, Rosa and Ryan. Hey, let's get everybody, you know, organized here in Arkansas. Talk to a young person about that. Don't forget the young people and the youth as we are, you know, saying, being advocates during this legislative session. Let them know what's going on. Help them cultivate and voice their concerns as well, too, because we need this to be an intergenerational conversation and movement. My name is Osyrus Bolly. Thank you for joining our weekly Friday webinars. This is our first one. Make sure you tune in next week. We coming right back with another hard-hitting topic about why Black history matters and the attacks that the legislature have been trying to put on Black history and the lies they're telling with that too as well.
Stay woke.
We're going to log off. And thank y'all for attending. Make sure y'all share this conversation, all right?
All right.
Peace.
Bye, Rose.